Southern Fried True Crime covers cases that are not suitable for young listeners, and there may also be some explicit language used. Listener discretion is advised. Today's episode is about sexual assault, so I would like to emphasize listener discretion. At 18 years old, you are standing on the cusp of your future. You are trying to figure out who you want to be, what you want to do, how you're going to achieve your dreams, and when you're going to feel like an adult. Some 18-year-olds have had more life experiences, which might make them more jaded or more determined. 18-year-old Jessica Currin was determined. She had to drop out of high school when she became pregnant at the age of 17. She was fortunate to come from a loving family, a strong base from which she could forge ahead and still have a bright future. Jessica was the daughter of the town's fire chief in Mayfield, Kentucky. She had once been a cheerleader and popular, although she is also described as quiet and once her son was born, a very good mom. In August of the year 2000, Jessica was at a crossroad. She wanted more independence. Just as she had found a place of her own and was planning her future, her life was cruelly snuffed out. The small-town police in Mayfield were horrified by the brutal murder, and they were also too inexperienced to properly investigate such a heinous crime, much less solve what would soon become a frustrating mystery. Welcome to episode 112. The horrific murder of Jessica Currin. Mayfield, Kentucky is just like many other small, rural towns here in the South. The city was established over 200 years ago in 1819 by a settler named John Anderson. It sits on the far western border between the states of Kentucky and Tennessee. Mayfield was the center of the Jackson Purchase, an 8-county region purchased by Isaac Shelby and Andrew Jackson from the Chickasaw Native Americans in 1818. Also known as the Treaty of Tuscaloosa, the Chickasaw people ceded all land north of the southern Tennessee border up to the Ohio River, the southern border of Indiana and Illinois Territory. The Chickasaw people have a long and complicated history. They were American allies in the Revolutionary War against the British, and were instrumental in the 7 Years' War, also known as the French and Indian War. In the following years, the Chickasaw would make several negotiations with the United States, but always having to cede their own land while trying to remain as allies. During the Civil War in the 1860s, the remaining Chickasaw in the Southeast allied with the Confederacy, angry over the U.S. government forcing them from their lands and also failing to protect them against the Plains tribes. They were considered one of the, quote, 5 civilized tribes, and naturally, the Confederacy promised them an Indian state if they were victorious. As the Confederacy was defeated, the Chickasaw tribe was pushed back more and more until their people were no longer in the Kentucky area or other southeastern states. Today, the Chickasaw Nation in Oklahoma is the 13th largest federally recognized tribe in the U.S. Most of their descendants remain as residents of what is now Oklahoma. Mayfield, Kentucky, according to the folklore of the area, is a small town that got its name from George Mayfield, a Mississippian who had been kidnapped by a couple of robbers after the man spent the day watching the nearby horse races. While held captive, Mayfield carved his name into a tree, hoping that a passerby would notice. When no one came to his rescue, he attempted to escape, but he was shot and fell into a creek where he drowned. The creek was named Mayfield Creek, and when settlers arrived, they adopted the name for the entire town. The larger area surrounding Mayfield, Graves County, officially remained neutral during the Civil War, but according to the city of Mayfield, many of its men fought as Confederates. Beyond the war between the states and later after World War I, the growing city of Mayfield erected 2 factories, which largely employed the men that remained. The Mayfield Woolen Mills and the Merritt Manufacturing Company, at one point in time, were two of the largest clothing manufacturers in the nation. Based on census data, the city of Mayfield supports just a little over 10,000 residents, with over a quarter of the residents falling below the poverty line. The population in Mayfield is primarily white, roughly 80% of all residents, with just 13% of residents identifying as Black and 5% identifying as Hispanic. Despite once hosting two profitable factories and supplying plenty of jobs back in the day, the city has been greatly impacted by drugs and petty crime, with the history of one murder that still haunts many that remain in Mayfield. And it isn't the case of local legend George Mayfield. It is the case of 18-year-old Jessica Currin. I'm going to pause now for a short commercial break. On the morning of August 1st, 2000, around 9:30 a.m., a teacher at Mayfield Middle School stumbled across a terrifying scene. There, against the back wall of the school, was the badly burned body of a young Black woman. Next to the body was a clump of hair and a charred and black braided belt. At her feet was a plastic bottle that smelled like gasoline. The first officers on the scene thought that the young woman's body had been there for around 2 days due to the flies and maggots. Mayfield police officer Tim Fortner was assigned as the lead investigator, despite his status as a patrolman. He was horrified by the scene before him. The young woman's face was frozen grotesquely, like so many victims of strangulation. Her clothing was partially torn from her body, her underwear ripped off, possibly indicating that she was sexually assaulted. But the young woman and her clothing were so badly burned, it was difficult to know exactly what happened to her by just seeing her pitiful body. It was Fortner's first homicide case, and from the start, he was in over his head. As reported by the Daily News, Fortner later admitted that he, quote, didn't have a clue what to do and that he had no idea how to organize a crime scene or look for forensic evidence. News spread quickly through the small community in Mayfield, and it wasn't long before a couple arrived at the police station, worried that the body that was found might be their recently missing teenage daughter. It was the local fire chief, Joe Currin, and his wife, Jean. 3 days before the woman's body was found behind Mayfield Middle School on July 29th, Jean Currin's 18-year-old daughter, Jessica, asked her to watch her 7-month-old son. Jean agreed to watch her grandson, Zion, and was happy when Jessica told her to pick her up for church in the morning. Earlier that July, Jessica had decided to move out of her parents' home and into a southeast Mayfield apartment. Jessica told her parents that the reason she was moving out was because she was upset that the man she thought was Zion's father had taken a paternity test and learned that he was actually not the father. She said she needed a fresh start. According to the Jackson Sun, Jessica's parents worried that she was actually moving out because they had curfews and made her do chores around their home. They did not want their daughter to move out. Despite their pleas, Jessica had stubbornly made up her mind and got her own place by mid-July. She had asked her mom to watch Zion for the day because she wanted to spend the evening at her new apartment with friends. The next day, Jessica's parents went to their daughter's apartment to pick her up for church, but she didn't answer the door. There was no one in the apartment. Confused, but assuming Jessica must still be with friends, they decided to head to church anyway and circle back afterwards, hoping she would be back by then. Once church was over, Jessica's parents checked her apartment again, but she still was not home. Later that evening, they tried again. Still no sign of their daughter. Joe and Jean took their grandson back to their home. They found it odd that Jessica had not called to check on Zion. Though she was such a young mother, she was a good mom, and it wasn't like her not to check in. According to the Courier-Journal, the parents checked Jessica's apartment again the morning and night of July 31st, but there was still no one home. Despite the strange circumstances and out-of-character behavior, Jessica's father didn't want to call the police because he didn't believe there was anything they could actually do. The Currins thought their daughter would show up eventually. It was the next day when Joe and Jean learned of the body found at the school. They went to the police station immediately after the news reached them. Their worst fears had come true. The couple recognized pieces of clothing and jewelry that were found with the body and confirmed that it was their 18-year-old daughter, Jessica Currin. Jessica Melissa Currin was born on November 29, 1981 in Mayfield, Kentucky, to Joe and Jean. Joe Currin was a dedicated father and husband who worked as a firefighter in the small western Kentucky town. In the year 2000, Joe had been promoted to the position of fire chief in Mayfield. Jessica was known as a quiet, decent, and nice young woman and a good mom. Her father described her as outgoing, friendly, and easy to get along with, someone who was a champion for the underdog. Jessica was very involved with her family and often helped organize holiday meals. She had 2 brothers, an older brother Joe, named for their father, and a younger brother named Josh, and she had 1 younger sister named Jaleesa. Her younger siblings would have been middle school age, going to the school where Jessica's body was found. Everyone in the Currin family had a name that started with the letter J, a charming detail for the close, loving family that Jessica belonged to. Jessica and her family attended the Lee Church of Christ in Mayfield. She took photos at get-togethers and happily recorded her siblings' special life events. And aside from being close to her family, Jessica excelled at school. She ran cross-country and was part of the cheerleading squad when she was in middle school. Jessica attended Graves County High School until she became pregnant at the age of 17. In December of 1999, she gave birth to her son, Zion Tayshawn. She didn't graduate from Graves, but after the birth of her son, she began working to complete her GED. And she planned to go to community college in the fall of 2000. Dental records later provided investigators with an exact match between the burned body and Jessica Currin. State medical examiner Dr. Mark Levon conducted Jessica's autopsy. He declared that her cause of death was strangulation. According to court transcripts, despite the concern that Jessica had been sexually assaulted as her body was found partially unclothed, Dr. Levon was unable to find physical signs of rape due to the burned and deteriorated condition of her body. He confirmed that Jessica had been murdered days prior to her body being found on July 29th. Jessica Currin's funeral was held on August 5th, 2000 at Byrne Funeral Home. She was laid to rest in Peaceful Valley Cemetery. She was survived by so many loving family members, her parents, grandparents, siblings, aunts, uncles, and numerous cousins. On July 30th, the morning after Jessica had been murdered, Graves County Deputy Sheriff Mike Perkins had seen a deputy jailer pushing a blue car on the side of the road. Perkins stopped and found that the driver of the car, Quincy Cross, had run out of gas. Perkins noticed that Cross didn't have a belt, shirt, or shoes on. Cross had gas on his pants, and there was a gas can in the back seat. After searching the car, Deputy Perkins arrested Quincy Cross for possession of cocaine. The jailer said he saw Cross trying to pour gas into his car, but noticed that he had accidentally spilled it on himself. Quincy Cross told the deputy that he was worried about being charged in Jessica Currin's murder because he smelled like gas. But Jessica's body had not even been found yet, and on the morning of July 30th, no one knew that she had been murdered, much less that her body had been burned. Police learned from Cross, a local drug dealer with a history of assaulting women, on his rap sheet, had been at a party in South Mayfield on the night of July 29th. Police interviewed people at the party and learned that Cross had been twirling his belt throughout the night, a belt similar to the one found near Jessica's body. But then the MPD's investigation into Quincy Cross and his possible connection to Jessica's murder did not initially go any further after this arrest for cocaine possession, or after her body was found, even though he was the only real lead in the case. And by late August, the leads in the case were drying up. There was a $10,000 reward for information about the murder. Before she was killed, Jessica's love life had grown complicated. She had learned that she was wrong about the paternity of her son. She suspected that Zion's real father was a white man named Jeremy Adams. At the same time, Jessica had started dating a new guy named Carlos Saxton. He went by the nickname Lolo. They'd only been dating a few weeks before Jessica was murdered. The Mayfield police began looking into the people that knew Jessica well, sticking with the statistics that most people are murdered by someone they know. They specifically focused on the men in her life, Jeremy Adams and Carlos Saxton. According to the Courier-Journal, police brought Adams in for questioning and showed him the crime scene photos in order to, quote, shock him into an admission. In early 2001, police heard from 3 McCracken County jail inmates where Jeremy Adams was serving time for an unrelated drug charge. The inmates said that Adams had told them about Jessica's murder and confessed that he had killed her, with Carlos Saxton acting as his accomplice. While in jail, Adams underwent a psych evaluation. It was found that he suffered from polysubstance dependence and antisocial personality disorder, and he had an IQ of 87. On February 14, 2001, 20-year-old Jeremy Adams was indicted for murder, tampering with physical evidence, and abuse of a corpse. 2 days later, on February 16th, 20-year-old Carlos Saxton was arrested for complicity in the murder. These arrests were based solely on the testimony of the jail inmates. Police theorized that Jessica was walking alone on July 29th when she met up with Jeremy Adams. Then Jeremy and Jessica went to the middle school, where police claimed Adams then killed Jessica with Carlos Saxton's help. The Commonwealth's entire case was based on the testimony from the McCracken jail inmates about what Jeremy Adams had supposedly told them. Adams' defense attorney said that the 3 inmates had misunderstood the story that Adams shared with them about Jessica's murder and claimed that he was simply mentioning the photos that police had used during questioning when trying to coax a confession out of him. The prosecution eventually admitted that there was no physical evidence linking Adams or Saxton to the murder, but this did not stop them from pursuing their case against the men. Tunnel vision, even by experienced investigators, is common, but it's hard to shake the memory of a gas-soaked Quincy Cross, a known drug dealer with a history of assaulting women, who mentioned Jessica's murder before her body had even been found. It's like the MPD and the Commonwealth attorney just wanted this case closed. On July 16, 2001, almost a year since Jessica's murder, the Graves Circuit Court judge ruled that Adams and Saxton would have separate trials, but the dates set for these trials would be moved more than once. On February 12, 2003, after years of rescheduled trials and a change of venue, the judge dismissed all charges against Adams after he found out that the Mayfield police, quote, failed and refused to provide between 18 and 20 video and audio tapes to Jeremy Adams's defense team. One of these tapes was of a juvenile woman saying she killed Jessica. Police claimed that they didn't believe the juvenile, causing them to withhold the tape from the defense. Shortly after this, the case against Carlos Saxton was also dropped. The infuriated judge said, quote, I have never seen a case so encumbered with problems, and I hope I never see another one. He also said that he was pretty close to putting Tim Fortner, the lead investigator on Jessica's case, and at that point, the assistant police chief of Mayfield, in jail for refusing to give evidence to the defense. It wasn't until this moment that the true level of mistakes and issues with the investigation by the Mayfield police became public. Frankly, The level of incompetence was ridiculous, and the determination to pin Jessica's murder on her former boyfriends was outrageous. Key evidence had been mishandled and lost. The clump of hair near where Jessica's body was found had gone missing, and the dress Jessica was wearing when she was murdered was discarded soon after her body was discovered. Her rape kit had been shoved into a box with other rape kits, rendering it useless in the investigation. The medical examiner recalled the police saying they didn't want the dress because it was partially burned and covered in maggots. Mayfield police also let Jessica's apartment be cleaned before they got around to searching it. On February 20th, 2003, the Mayfield police finally turned the Jessica Currin case over to the Kentucky State Police. In May of 2003, Mayfield Assistant Police Chief Tim Fortner resigned. Although it was clear that Fortner had muddled the investigation into Jessica's murder, he claimed that his resignation had nothing to do with the case. A month later, the Mayfield police chief followed suit and resigned, also claiming that it had nothing to do with Jessica's murder. The Ocala Star-Banner reported that the resignations of Fortner and the chief were due to corruption within the department, which makes sense because in March of 2004, it was announced that $9,000 in reward money for Jessica's murder was, quote, mistakenly spent. But the months dragged on in the state's investigation. The KSP seemed to have no better handle on the case than the local cops did, and it was around this time that an amateur sleuth began to shake out new leads. Since she had first learned about the case, Susan Galbreath, a Mayfield homemaker, had been captivated by Jessica's murder, and she had never forgotten what had happened to the young mother. In fact, the day that Jessica's body had been found at Mayfield Middle School, Susan had witnessed the scene. She had been at a nearby coffee shop when someone came in shouting about the body found at the middle school. She, along with a group of people, walked over and watched police work the scene. She saw Jessica Currin's body herself, and she never forgot that image. She quickly became consumed by the young woman's murder. As the Mayfield police struggled to find Jessica's murderer and narrowly focused on Jeremy Adams and Carlos Saxton, Susan actually began hitting the streets. Little by little, she heard whispers about the case. In April of 2004, Susan sent an email to senior BBC reporter Tom Mangold after seeing him on the BBC's version of 60 Minutes. In the email, she explained what she had learned about the Jessica Currin murder and asked Mangold for his help in investigating. To her surprise, Mangold agreed to help Susan with the case, and in May, met with her in Kentucky. The two started investigating Jessica's murder as a team, interviewing people around Mayfield who were willing to offer information. Throughout their investigation, Mangold and Susan repeatedly heard the same name, Quincy Cross. I'm going to pause now to hear a final word from today's sponsors. Quincy Cross was a young black man originally from Tiptonville, Tennessee. At the time of Jessica's murder, Cross would have been around the age of 24 years old. According to his family, he grew up in an abusive household. When his mother remarried, Quincy was forced to witness his stepfather's abuse of his mother. The new husband also verbally abused him and his sister. Quincy eventually reached his breaking point and left home at a young age, dropping out of school after the 9th grade. He reportedly took care of his grandmother with Alzheimer's afterwards. But Cross also had a long criminal record, which included drug offenses, as well as abuse of the women in his life. Because as we know, domestic violence can be a vicious circle. The first time he was ever charged was after he assaulted a girlfriend, who he claimed had stolen money from him. During the attack, Cross's girlfriend said he choked her, a major warning sign for domestic abuse turning deadly. Quincy Cross, the drug dealer, had attended a big party on the night that Jessica was murdered, where alcohol, marijuana, and cocaine had been in abundant supply. Susan managed to get the host of the party to talk to her. The host said that Quincy was acting bizarrely and said, quote, "He kept saying he wanted to find women. He repeated this over and over. He was wired and never stopped talking." Mangold and Susan went to a state police investigator to ask them to look into Quincy Cross, but they were ignored. Mangold, with responsibilities waiting for him back home, left Kentucky and returned to England. Even though she had been ignored by the state police and had now lost her partner, Susan Galbreath was determined to prove Quincy Cross, now 4 years later, a convicted sex offender and drug dealer, had killed Jessica. Susan continued to work the case in her spare time, eventually making a connection with the lead state investigator on the case, Jamie Mills. With the approval of Mills, Susan began to wear a wire as she worked as an unpaid detective in the Jessica Currin case. She interviewed Jeremy Adams, Jessica's former boyfriend, who had landed in prison for an unrelated case, but she felt sure of his innocence. It was around this time that news about Susan's involvement in the investigation began to spread, and as Quincy Cross began to hang out around her property, she feared that he was stalking her. Susan later told Mangold, quote, "I guess he was playing around with the idea of doing me in and needed to see how vulnerable I was. Maybe it was just intimidation. I don't know, but it was spooky." In November of 2004, Detective Jamie Mills was suspended from the Kentucky State Police for an unrelated issue. On November 29th that same year, in an effort to keep their daughter's case in the news and media, Joe and Jean Currin led a group of 30 family members and friends on a mile-long walk from the Dunbar Park to the courthouse. It would have been Jessica's 23rd birthday. 4 months later, Jamie Mills was officially fired from the KSP. Mills was replaced with a new detective as the Kentucky State Police's lead investigator on the case. But the new detective and Susan did not mesh, and she soon found herself working the case alone again, save for regular check-ins with Mangold back in England. In February of 2005, Susan Galbreath went to interview Quincy Cross. She pretended to be a true crime author, researching Jessica's murder in order to set up the interview. State police asked Susan to wear a wire during her conversation with Cross. She later told Mangold, quote, "It was agreed 3 detectives would follow me and observe the meeting as closely as they could. If there were problems, I was to use the code, 'I wish my big brother was here,' and they would storm the house. Scared," she added, "you better believe it, I was petrified." She went on to tell Mangold, quote, "He told me exactly what kind of belt was around Jessica's throat. I knew this detail had never been publicly released. When I told him what Jessica's body looked like, he started getting agitated and pacing the room and saying, 'I don't want to hear this shit.' Then he said he had never hit a girl, but, quote, 'I'll choke one out.' Then she said, quote, 'He wanted to know if any DNA had been found on the gas bottle discovered nearby. When we got back to the KSP post, I broke down and wept. We listened to the tape and I thought, I could never do that again.'" Susan Galbreath not only had amazing instincts, she was a hell of a gutsy woman. Joe Currin was determined to keep Jessica's case at the forefront of the news. He held protests at local, state, and federal offices. He went to the Paducah FBI office and drove 250 miles to the Kentucky Capitol. 2 months after Susan's interview with Cross, and thanks to the media attention that Joe Currin was consistently encouraging around his daughter's case, an investigator from Reverend Al Sharpton's National Action Network got involved. The investigator, Alton McDonald, declared Jessica's murder a hate crime. On December 15, 2005, Jessica's body was exhumed so that a second autopsy could be performed. The following day, it was reported that the autopsy resulted in new, useful evidence, but it was never disclosed what that evidence was. And there was never any proof or connection made that would suggest Jessica's murder was a hate crime. Although, considering the gruesome crime scene, I think it is understandable that Jessica's family and Sharpton's organization thought that it was a possibility. These developments, including pressure from Alton McDonald and a meeting that Joe Currin had with Greg Stumbo, Kentucky's new Attorney General, led to the case being taken over by the Kentucky Bureau of Investigation in 2006. This announcement made Susan and the Currin family feel optimistic for the first time in a while. Susan gave the KBI all of her information and notes on the case, including first and second-hand accounts that pointed to Quincy Cross and 4 others as being involved in the murder. A few months later, Susan started a MySpace tribute page called Justice for Jessica, hoping that someone would send in a tip. After a while of not hearing anything, Susan had the bright idea of actually including the names of the 5 people she had identified throughout her amateur investigation as people of interest on the page. In February of 2007, a tip came in. A woman named Victoria Caldwell sent Susan a message saying, quote, "I will help the police as much as I can, but I really don't know who to trust. I am afraid someone might kill me if I testify to things about this. Can you help me?" Victoria's name had come up several times throughout Susan's investigation, and she felt confident that she had found her new lead. Susan contacted the KBI and was connected to Special Agent Lee Wise, who was working the case. As Susan gained Victoria's trust online, Victoria shared her location and information. Agent Wise and another special agent went to California, where Victoria had fled after the murder, to pick up the young woman for questioning. Once back in Kentucky, Victoria volunteered her story about what really happened on the night of July 29th, 2000. According to Victoria, she and Jessica and a 17-year-old girl named Venetia Stubblefield went to then 15-year-old Victoria's house. Venetia told Victoria that they were going to hang out with a 24-year-old guy named Quincy Cross. Victoria said that she, Jessica, and Venetia all got in Cross's car and went to a house to pick up 21-year-old Tamara Caldwell, Victoria's cousin, and a 20-year-old guy named Jeff Burton. The 6 people in the car now headed to Jeff Burton's house. According to Victoria, Quincy Cross gave everyone some cocaine while they were on the way to Burton's house. She said Quincy and Tamara, the 2 oldest in the group at ages 24 and 21, started sexually harassing Jessica. Jessica asked them to stop, but they wouldn't. When they all got to Burton's house, Cross picked up a small baseball bat from the floor of his car and hit Jessica on the head, causing her to pass out. Cross and Burton then carried Jessica into a bedroom and put her on the bed. Victoria said she followed them into the bedroom. Cross tried to make Jessica perform oral sex on him, but he couldn't get her mouth open. So instead, he masturbated on Jessica's body. Jeff Burton then raped Jessica as Tamara Caldwell held her legs open. As Jessica was raped, she started to regain consciousness. According to Victoria Caldwell, Jessica began making noises and kept saying the name of her son over and over again. To make her stop, Quincy Cross took a wrench and hit Jessica in the head until she was unconscious again, before he began choking her with his belt. Victoria said that after she heard Jessica gasping for air, she knew she was dead. The younger girls, Victoria and Venetia, wanted to leave, but Victoria said that Quincy Cross stopped them. He wanted everyone there to take part in the assault on Jessica, so they would all keep their mouths shut for fear of being implicated in her murder. She said they all sexually assaulted Jessica's corpse before Cross finally stopped or lost interest. He passed around more coke, and then Victoria said everyone present began having sex with each other. When the partying was over, Jessica's body was wrapped in a blanket and taken to Burton's garage. It wasn't until the body started to smell that Victoria Caldwell, Venetia Stubblefield, and 2 other guys, 19-year-old Austin Leach and 14-year-old Isaac Benjamin, took Jessica's body to Mayfield Middle School and set it on fire. After getting Victoria Caldwell's appalling statement about what took place the night of Jessica's murder, investigators with the KBI tracked down Venetia Stubblefield. She provided the agents with a mostly similar list of events about that night. I am not going to repeat Venetia's full story of that night. The details are just as horrific as what Victoria said. There were two major differences in Venetia's story. The first being that she said she had been playing cards with Victoria and Jessica when Jessica decided it was time for her to go home. She left on foot, and later Venetia, Victoria, Tamara, and Quincy Cross rode around looking for Jessica until they found her. Quincy offered her a ride. Venetia insisted that Jessica said yes, but only to a ride home. She did not go to that party willingly. Venetia's version makes more sense with what we know of Jessica Currin. The young mother planned to be home and ready to go to church the next morning with her family. She was not known as a party girl. She didn't do drugs. It's hard to believe she was hanging out in that car for any reason other than a ride home. The second major difference is that Venetia said she saw Quincy Cross raping Jessica, not masturbating as Victoria said. According to the Paducah Sun newspaper, Venetia Stubblefield underwent a 14-hour taped interview in which she provided these details to the KBI agents. Her details about the rape and murder of Jessica Currin matched most of Victoria Caldwell's version. It later came out that Quincy Cross and the group of witnesses had been police suspects a few days after the murder. Venetia Stubblefield was interviewed at least 17 times between Jessica's murder and her arrest, but she didn't bring up Quincy Cross until 2005 and didn't bring up the belt until an officer asked her about it in 2007. According to her statement, after the murder, Victoria Caldwell feared for her life and fled to California to avoid Quincy Cross. On March 30th, 2007, 4 months before the 7-year anniversary of Jessica's murder, Quincy Cross, Jeffrey Burton, and Tamara Caldwell were indicted for murder, kidnapping, first-degree rape, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with physical evidence. Victoria Caldwell and Venetia Stubblefield were indicted on abuse of a corpse and tampering with evidence charges. In May of 2007, Victoria and Venetia pled guilty to evidence tampering and abuse of a corpse. Victoria was sentenced to just 5 years in prison, while Venetia was sentenced to 7 years. In July of 2008, Isaac Benjamin and Austin Leach were indicted for 2 counts each of evidence tampering since they, quote, removed, concealed, or mutilated Jessica's body and then burned it. Leach was also indicted for 1 count of perjury due to lying at a grand jury hearing in October of 2004. Benjamin entered an Alford plea to 1 count of complicity to tamper with evidence. As part of the plea, the second tampering charge was dropped. In August of 2009, Leach was acquitted after a 7-day trial. I find it strange that no mention of Isaac Benjamin's age of only 14 at the time of Jessica's murder is mentioned anywhere. I'm not excusing the actions of the teenager, of course, but I do find it odd. But then again, Victoria Caldwell was only 15. In September of 2008, Jeffrey Burton and Tamara Caldwell entered Alford pleas to second-degree manslaughter and abuse of a corpse. Burton also entered an Alford plea for tampering with physical evidence. Burton was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Tamara Caldwell was sentenced to 10. While they may not have been the ones to strangle and bludgeon Jessica, both were older and played a large part in orchestrating the attack. 21-year-old Tamara was in the car when Jessica was picked up, and the rape and murder occurred at 20-year-old Jeff's house. To me, the sentences they received, in contrast to the gruesome rape and murder, are very light. Quincy Cross's trial started on March 27, 2008. The trial was held in a different county, Hickman County Circuit Court in Clinton, Kentucky. The prosecution presented the following case based on Victoria Caldwell and Venetia Stubblefield's statements. On the night of July 29, 2000, Quincy Cross offered Jessica a ride, in which she accepted because she thought he would take her home. Cross started sexually harassing Jessica, but she refused his advances. This made him mad, so he took her to a house where he rendered her unconscious, raped and sodomized her, strangled her to death, and continued to perform sex acts on her corpse, and ordered other people to also participate in the abuse of her corpse. After this, Jessica's body was taken to the Mayfield Middle School and set on fire. The state had 3 key witnesses: Venetia Stubblefield, Victoria Caldwell, and a woman named Rosie Christ, who was Victoria's sister. Along with the testimony of these 3 witnesses, the state had one other piece of evidence. Victoria Caldwell presented authorities with a diary entry dated August 1st, 2000, the day that Jessica's body was found. The entry read, "Damn, they found the body. Man, I hope they don't find out it was us." The defense challenged the validity of the diary entry. They said the entry could have been written at any time. Although a chief forensic chemist with the Secret Service was unable to determine if the ink used to write in the diary entry was commercially available in 2000, he testified that there could be many reasons for this and stated that it did not mean that the diary entry was faked. The defense's case centered on Jeremy Adams and Carlos Saxton as the real perpetrators. They argued that the original arrests in this case were right from the start, and these 2 men worked together and were responsible for killing Jessica Currin. Quincy Cross's defense explained that the prosecution's case relied on the testimony of Rosie Christ, Victoria Caldwell, and Venetia Stubblefield, and argued that the 3 women were unreliable. To prove this, the defense pointed to how Venetia Stubblefield and Victoria Caldwell had lied to police in the past, and all 3 of the women did admit on the stand that they had lied in the past. The defense also described how the 14-hour-long recording of Venetia Stubblefield's statement was stopped multiple times. Each time the recording would begin again, Venetia would reportedly remember new information. Despite already having testified for the prosecution, Rosie Christ, Victoria's sister, recanted on the stand while testifying for the defense. She stated that everything she had told to the agents with the KBI was untrue. According to Christ, she didn't know anything about Cross's actions, and she had only lied because investigators threatened to take her children away. Christ was later charged with perjury, to which she pled guilty. The defense had a forensic pathologist, Dr. George Nichols, testify about the results of Jessica's autopsy. Nichols testified that there was, quote, "no medical or scientific evidence that the cause of Jessica's death was strangulation or that Jessica had been raped." The defense had multiple people testify who previously identified Adams and Saxton as the perpetrators. They also presented evidence that on the night of the murder, Saxton was wearing the same type of belt used to kill Jessica. After a long and arduous trial, on April 8, 2008, the jury took 3 hours to find Quincy Cross guilty of murder, kidnapping, and rape. The following day, the jury spent around 8 hours deliberating on whether or not Cross should get the death penalty. In the end, he was spared, and was instead sentenced to life without parole for the murder, kidnapping, and rape charges. Cross was sentenced to an additional 50 years for sodomy, 5 years for abuse of a corpse, and 3 years for tampering with physical evidence. Unsurprisingly, Cross attempted several appeals in his case, and he appealed to the United States District Court, Western District of Kentucky, Paducah Division, after his first few appeals were denied. In his latest appeal in 2016, Cross claimed to have 3 new pieces of evidence that were not available at the time of his trial. The first piece of evidence was a transcribed interview dated in 2012 between a detective with the Kentucky Innocence Project and Victoria Caldwell, one of the state's key witnesses during Cross's trial. The transcribed interview was not on tape, so it didn't carry much weight. Victoria Caldwell allegedly claimed that she and Venetia Stubblefield made up the story about the night of Jessica's murder to get the reward money. Supposedly, both Victoria and her sister Rosie told the Kentucky Innocence Project that they were intimidated by the KBI. Along with all this information, in this appeal, Cross also stated that Jessica's father, Joe, signed an affidavit on October 27, 2014, stating that he does not believe Cross is responsible for Jessica's death and that Cross had been wrongfully convicted. According to the affidavit, Joe stated that he believes there were, quote, flaws and inadequacies in the investigation of Jessica's murder. An evidentiary hearing was held on October 13, 2016, to see if Cross's claims of innocence were true. The court found that this so-called new evidence to prove his innocence were all things that had been introduced at trial. They were just repackaged as new. Evidently, it was part of how the defense had tried to impeach their testimony at trial by getting them to admit they lied previously to the police. On November 9, 2016, Quincy Cross's appeal was denied. It turned out that the Kentucky Innocence Project had not actually been assisting Cross with his case and had never done any legal work for Cross. Besides generally researching the case and speaking with the 3 witnesses in his trial, the Kentucky Innocence Project had chosen to stop looking into Cross's case well before he filed the appeal. All of Quincy Cross's other appeals have been denied. Susan Galbreath was presented with the Kentucky Outstanding Citizen Award in 2009 for her work in solving Jessica's murder. After researching the Jessica Currin case, she translated those skills into working as an amateur journalist. In August of 2018, she passed away from natural causes at 58 years old. Quincy Cross is still incarcerated in Luther Luckett Correctional Complex in Kentucky, where he will serve the remainder of his life sentence. Jessica's parents raised their grandson as their own, alongside Jessica's younger siblings. Growing up, Zion called them Mom and Dad, and Joe and Jean Currin told Zion that Jessica was his older sister. They decided to wait to tell Zion about his mom until he was older. Zion eventually graduated high school in Mayfield, where he was an award-winning runner. This case was extremely difficult to research and speak about for 2 main reasons. First, the details of the crimes committed against Jessica are horrific. This young woman, at just 18 years old, was attacked and murdered by a group of people led by one especially sadistic man. I cannot even begin to imagine the terror she felt once she was in that house, outnumbered, and knew she could not escape. And I do not want to imagine the pain she endured. Jessica had her entire adult life and the life of her newborn child to look forward to. She was just beginning to gain her independence, moving into her new apartment, entering a new relationship, and raising her 7-month-old son Zion. All of that was ripped away from Jessica, her family, and her friends on the night of July 29, 2000. The second reason this case is so difficult was how little concrete information there is out there about Jessica Currin's murder. Despite the 8-year span from Jessica's murder to the conviction of her killer and his accomplices, there has been little media attention on the case outside of Kentucky. The little information available about Jessica's murder is riddled with misinformation, contradictions, and speculation, making it hard to discern fact from rumor. Hell, I had trouble just finding the correct ages of all of the people involved with the attack on Jessica that night and those that helped burn her body. This whole case is a confusing, frustrating mess. And the multiple statements from Venetia and Victoria are definitely problematic. And there was no physical evidence tying Quincy Cross or anyone else to Jessica's murder. The Mayfield police had destroyed all hope of a DNA match by discarding Jessica's clothing and improperly storing her rape kit. I think no matter how you feel morally about the death penalty, it's cases like this that will make you question your own feelings. What Quincy Cross was convicted of was so heinous, I am surprised he didn't get the death penalty. But considering this travesty of an investigation at all levels, lost evidence, hidden witnesses with changing stories, I don't think I would have voted for the death penalty either if I had been on that jury. If not for her father's determination, I don't think there would have been a conclusion to Jessica's case. But unfortunately, at the time of writing this episode, and as far as I know, Joe Currin still does not believe that the right people were punished for his daughter's murder. I think the matching stories of Victoria and Venetia, as well as the guilty and Alfred pleas of the accomplices, do point to the guilt of Quincy Cross. But that is not hard evidence, and we all know that people take plea bargains all the time rather than face a trial, gambling with a longer sentence. It is frustrating that there are still lingering doubts in Jessica's case, and particularly heartbreaking that her father still believes her killer walks free. Despite all of this, out of the investigations and trials in this case, there is one fact that remains. Jessica Currin deserved better. A much better professional investigation into her murder, and a better, more respectful and attentive representation in the media. Though Jessica's murder was not a hate crime, you have to wonder how differently the media would have responded if she had been a young white woman. Pressure from the media may have had a positive effect on the investigation. The Mayfield police might have worked with the state police and the KBI from the beginning. There are just so many what-ifs in this tragic case. But we know for sure that Jessica's parents lost their beloved daughter, and her son lost his mother. And Jessica lost her future at just the tender age of 18, when she had the world at her fingertips. Southern Fried True Crime is produced by me, Erica Kelley. Today's episode was researched by Haley Gray and written by Hannah Newcomb, with additional research, writing, and editing by me. The audio is edited and mixed by Ches Gray of Gray Multimedia. Southern Fried's original music is by Rob Harrison of Gamma Radio, and the original graphic art is by Coley Horner. If you are not already a member, come join my Facebook group. While we do discuss crime, we also share memes and have a lot of laughs. We worship our patron saint, Dolly Parton, and our motto is no shitasses allowed. If you enjoyed today's show, don't forget to subscribe and please tell a friend or rate and review on iTunes. I'm also on most large platforms like Stitcher and Spotify, as well as Stitcher Premium, where you can listen ad-free. If you have any case suggestions, please email southernfriedtruecrime@gmail.com. I do not accept case suggestions on social media private messages, but please feel free to reach out by email. Not only do I get my most interesting and little-known cases from listener suggestions, I love hearing from you guys. Until next time, thanks so much for listening. Y'all take care.